I think the role of the musician, particularly a folk musician, is to explore social issues. If we look at what folk music is the music of the people. The music of the people carries with it the idea of politics, of values, of principles. Folk music in particular is based in the idea of equality. If we look at any of the major kind of social issues or social revolutions that have happened in any country across the world, the folk musician has been there to record that in history. I think folk songs can be interpreted as historical artifacts for the generations to come to look back at what it was actually like to live in a particular era, to experience a particular revolution or to experience a particular issue as it was happening, because music and songs carry with it emotion, it carries with it feeling, and that feeling doesn't go out of date, that feeling doesn't die. Like in psychology they talk about the mind has no time frame, neither has songs. Songs don't have a time frame either, and particularly the emotion that they carry with them. I think that's why in the Druids that we value so much in recent times the idea of the folk genre, because it creates that space to explore issues, to explore them values and principles.
I'm too old to work and I'm too young to die. Tell me where.
Our band is definitely based on the idea of equality, the idea of inclusion, empowerment. We like the idea that music can create that communal experience for people, regardless of their background, their race, their ethnicity. All of us who play music in the band, plus our road manager, we are all in recovery from addiction, every one of us. So I suppose we came to a point in our history of the band that if we're not going to address that subject, who is? Who's going to address that subject? Is it okay for me to stand on the stage, or the other members of the band to stand on the stage and ignore that? When I think that our music has the power to provoke people into thought. Our music has the power to provoke people in a positive way to try and make change in their own lives, or even not change, but to evoke a thought that might encourage some sort of a shift in thinking around drug use or around gambling or around whatever it might be. Not that we see ourselves as evangelists, not that we see ourselves as people who are there to save anyone. We're not. We can hardly save ourselves, and that's the truth. But I think our role as musicians and folk musicians, as our history has shown us, and if we examine Irish folk music in particular, and even the name of our band, the Druids were, Celtic Druids were, they seen themselves as people who carried a message, who invoked people and provoked people to examine their own consciousness. Let that be from a spiritual point of view, or let that be from the way they were living their lives, their lifestyle. And in some ways, you know, in a very minor way, I think, if we carry that on, well, you know, I think I'd be sitting here a very happy person if we have even slightly provoked someone to think about their own lives through the music and through the songs that we sing.
I wish that I was home in Donegal.
I think over recent times we've started to talk more on podcasts and radio interviews and about our own personal situations around addiction. I've been clean and sober for 29 years. Other members of the band are a lot shorter, been clean and sober than I am, but I've never really, only over the last year or so I've started speaking about that publicly. Something that I always kept very private to myself, but since we've started speaking like that, the response from people has been unbelievable. It really has. There's so many people struggling at the moment, particularly down where we live. Every town and village is a whitewash with cocaine, and as soon as we started speaking like that, people gravitate towards us, looking for help, looking for direction, looking to connect with us, to relate to us, and you know, they hear some of our songs on YouTube and so on, and they connect with them again, and there has been a number of occasions where people will say to us, you know, that song provoked me into going to see my GP or to going to see a counsellor, or go into rehab. We spend a good bit of our time when the pandemic is not here playing in rehab centres. We do that free of charge for people, and you know, that connection of somebody in early recovery, a young person or anybody really who's in the doldrums, like who are their head is absolutely mashed, and music, that connection with music again, and even with the people who are playing it, it can provide great encouragement, really, really great encouragement, and a power to continue on.
Sometimes he just lays there.
I think as society changes and as issues change, I think folk music reflects that. So if we go back to the 1980s in Ireland, or even the 70s, the 60s, when there was mass immigration, mass recession in Ireland, and there was political upheaval, particularly in the 1980s, I think folk music reflected that, reflected them issues. Again, I'll go back to that point where folk music is the music of the people. There was a very famous Irish folk historian, his name was Frank Hart, and his most famous saying was that the people in power write the history and those who suffer write the songs. So his thinking was that the real history of any particular territory is in the songs, because the people who write them songs are the people who lived through it, not the people who kind of come decades after and look back at it and write it. It carries emotion. Again, the songs carry emotion. So that idea of a song being a historical artifact, if I want to understand what it was like to live in the 1980s, although I was a young person myself in the 1980s, but if I want to know what it was like to live in Wexford, where I grew up, where there was mass immigration, mass unemployment, mass recession, if I listen to some of the local songs that were written down there by bands like Baru, who was a folk band, or the Jarvies, who were a folk band, if I listen to some of their songs, it transports me right back there, right back to, and I can feel what it was like to live there. I can feel the trauma, the shame, the guilt, the oppression of unemployment, and folk music for me has the power to do that. I think it's a marvellous genre of music, and I suppose the difficult part for me sometimes is that for a period of our band we excluded ourselves from that. We didn't buy into that whole kind of idea of folk music. We were kind of caught in a particular genre of music, which reflected the political struggle in Ireland, the historical struggle, the events of 1916, the events of the Civil War, the events of the War of Independence, and we found ourselves kind of caught in a kind of a grip where we felt compelled to sing songs that reflected that particular era to the exclusion of everything else. And since we've made the decision to kind of widen out that net, the liberation that we feel as people is unbelievable. Now, you know, not all our gigs, not 100% of our gigs are issue-based, they're not. You know, we sing songs which are a bit of crack as well. We sing songs which provide enjoyment for people and people clap along to. But without doubt, at various times during the show, there are moments in our show where, you know, that emotion, you can feel it coming from the audience. You can feel the song provokes that emotion. I have memories of, we done a show in Naas in County Kildare on the 28th of February. It was actually this time last year, the last theatre show we done. And we sang a song called The Hard Days. It's a song that we got from a songwriter in America called Kevin McCrill. And he wrote this song about addiction, he wrote the song about anxiety and depression. But when we heard the song, it reflected this idea of addiction for us. So we sang this song in the Moat Theatre, and the amount of people that spoke to us afterwards, kind of coming up and saying, look, you know, I have a brother who suffers that, I have a sister who suffers that, my father suffers that, I've been there myself. And you could feel the whole atmosphere in the theatre change the very minute we sang that song. That's what I love about folk music. That's what I love about the power of the performance. To kind of touch somebody, to look in somebody's eyes and see a change, see a light bulb go on, see them connecting with something. So again, when you sing that song about addiction, you can be guaranteed there's people in the audience who are in that situation. and to know, for them to know that they're not on their own.
I'll wait for you, I'll think of you.
I think in the early days when we started, our presentation of issues, particularly the issue around the national question, I think we presented that, well, I presented that, it wasn't we, I presented that in a kind of an angry, kind of aggressive manner. And the response you get back from the audience is exactly what you give out. You know, you get an angry, aggressive response back. We found ourselves after a short time that most of our audience were, you know, young men in their mid-20s or even younger, and not that there's anything wrong with that, or not that we weren't grateful for them being there. Of course we were, and we still are. But our presentation, my presentation of the issues have changed. And I've learned that stagecraft over the years, that it's not always he who shouts the loudest gets heard. Actually, the people who shout the loudest, I've found, are the last ones to get heard. You know, things can be put across in a more articulate manner. Issues can be dealt with and presented in a manner that's not offensive to people. That's not that you don't get someone's back up straight away by that presentation. But that's been a learning experience, and I think you have to learn that on the road. You have to learn that you can't just switch that on. It has to be trial and error. And I've made mistakes. You know, we've all made mistakes, but I've made mistakes over the years, and you know, at times I've said things on stage I shouldn't have said, and I regret. But I can't go back and change that. But what's important about that is that you're able to hold your hands up, accept responsibility for what's been done, and try and learn from that and move on, and change. You know, we talk about change all the time. Everybody talks about change all the time, but what is change? Change is about not doing the same thing again. Change is about trying to find something different to do. Change is about seeing a new way of doing things, and it's certainly my hope that within our band that we've done that. You know, that we've made that change, we've made that step forward to be more inclusive, to be more in line with what we believe in as people, which is absolutely the value of equality. You know.
Boston Road.
Even if we look at our own history, you know, I'm a very proud Irishman. I really am. I'm a very, very proud Irishman. And, you know, I would have very strong political beliefs. And them political beliefs, you know, they haven't changed that much over the years, but my understanding of them beliefs and my education of them beliefs has changed a lot. If we look back to, you know, Theobald Wolfe who was seen as the godfather of republicanism, he espoused this idea of equality. He spoke about that all the time, about the inclusion process. And that's going back 300 years at this stage. So even 300 years ago, we were talking about equality. And I think that's so important today, you know, equality of outcome, equality of opportunity, and just pure equality. I love to look down in the audience, particularly when we're in the States. We play festivals in the States, and there's thousands of people at them. And you look in the audience, and the diverse mix of people that's in the audience, you know, from Hispanics to, you know, to African Americans to white Caucasians, young people, old people, and it's just wonderful. It's wonderful to see people just enjoying this tradition that we have, this tradition and heritage that has been handed on to us as musicians and entertainers. It's our job to keep that intact. It's our job to develop that and to hand it on to the next generation as well. And if we can hand it on with them values intact still, I think that's a very powerful thing. I think our job has been well done.